The CEO's decision. John Miller had built a successful empire. As the CEO of a large corporation, he was known for his sharp business mind and his ability to make quick decisions. His company had grown rapidly under his leadership, and he was proud of what he had accomplished. Yet, despite all of his success, there was one question that kept nagging at him. How well did he really know his employees? He had always kept his distance from the lower-level staff. His office was on the top floor, far away from the noise and chaos of the office floor. He only saw his employees during meetings or company-wide events. He knew their names and faces, but did he truly understand their lives and struggles? Did they respect him? Or were they just following orders because they had to? For weeks, John had heard rumors of unhappy employees, grumbling about long hours, low pay, and poor management. At first, he dismissed it as typical office gossip. But as the rumors grew louder, he began to wonder if there was some truth to them. What if the people he trusted to run the company were not as happy as he thought? What if there was a bigger issue under the surface? One day, while in a meeting with his top executives, John overheard a conversation between two of his employees. One was a janitor who worked at the company's headquarters. The janitor was complaining about how poorly he was treated by some of the higher-ups. He explained that he was often ignored or looked down upon by the people he cleaned for. John was taken aback. He had never once thought about how the janitors or other lower-ranking employees might feel. As the conversation continued, John's curiosity grew. He realized that he had no real idea what life was like for the employees who worked beneath him. They were the backbone of his company, yet he had never bothered to get to know them. He began to wonder if he had been so focused on his own success that he had ignored the struggles of those around him. That's when the idea hit him. What if he could see things from their perspective? What if, for just one day, he could experience the company through the eyes of someone who didn't have the power or privileges that came with being a CEO? John couldn't shake the thought. He wanted to understand the real issues his employees were facing, the ones that weren't discussed in board meetings or emails. So he made a bold decision. He would go undercover. He knew it wouldn't be easy. As the CEO, he was a well-known figure, and people would likely recognize him quickly. But he didn't care. He needed to know the truth, and he was willing to do whatever it took to find it. The plan was simple. John would disguise himself as a janitor and work a full shift, cleaning the office just like any other employee. He would blend in, listen, and observe. He would get a first-hand look at how his employees were really treated and how they felt about the company. Most importantly, he would see if the rumors about unhappiness and dissatisfaction were true. John spent the next few days preparing. He arranged for a janitor's uniform to be delivered to his office, and he came up with a new backstory. He would pretend to be a new employee recently hired to clean the offices. He would keep his head down, do his job, and keep quiet. He knew that no one would recognize him in the uniform, and that was exactly what he wanted. On the day of his undercover mission, John arrived at work early. He put on the janitor's uniform, adjusted his hat, and looked at himself in the mirror. For a moment, he hardly recognized the man staring back at him. The suit and tie were gone, replaced by a blue jumpsuit and rubber gloves. His face was obscured by a cap and a mask, making him look just like any other janitor. He took a deep breath and stepped into the office building. As he walked through the doors, he felt a rush of nerves. He had always been the one in charge, the one who gave the orders. Now he was the one who would follow orders. His entire identity was about to change for the day, and he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. John pushed his cleaning cart down the hall, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the buzz of conversations and the sound of phones ringing, but he stayed focused. He made his way to the first floor, where he began cleaning the restrooms. No one paid him any attention, and he was relieved. He went about his work, scrubbing the sinks and mopping the floors. He tried to stay out of the way and keep a low profile. But as the day wore on, he began to notice things that disturbed him. He overheard one conversation between two employees about how they were struggling to make ends meet. Another group of workers complained about how their requests for time off were ignored. It was a side of the company he had never seen before. The more John listened, the more he realized that his employees were unhappy, and many of them didn't feel valued. They were working hard, but they felt like their efforts went unnoticed. The higher-ups, including him, were too focused on the big picture to notice the struggles of the people working in the background. By the end of the day, John had seen enough. His decision to go undercover had opened his eyes to a side of the company he had been blind to for years. He had learned more in a single day than he had in his entire career as CEO. But now, the real challenge was what to do with this newfound knowledge. What would he do next? How would he fix the issues he had discovered? That was a question he would need to answer soon, but for now, he had to process everything he had learned. As John left the office that evening, he couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. The company was on the verge of something major, and it was up to him to make sure that the right changes were made. He had a lot of work to do, but he was ready to face it. The CEO had learned some difficult truths that day, but they were truths that would change everything. The truth begins to unfold. The next day, John Miller arrived at the office early, still reflecting on the undercover shift he had completed as a janitor. His mind was racing. He had seen things that he could never have imagined. The stories he overheard, the frustration in the voices of his employees, and the resentment that seemed to fill the air. It was all so different from what he had assumed. As the CEO, he had always thought the company was running smoothly. But now, he was beginning to realize that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. John's mind kept returning to a particular moment from the day before. He had been cleaning the executive bathrooms when he overheard a conversation between two managers. They were discussing a new employee who had recently asked for a raise. One of the managers laughed it off, saying, "Let them eat cake. There are plenty of workers out there who will take their place." John's heart sank when he heard that. He had worked hard to build the company's reputation, but now, in his new position, he was hearing how the employees felt about being treated like replaceable pieces of the puzzle. He knew he had to act, but where should he start? He decided to begin by quietly observing. After all, his undercover mission was about listening and learning, not immediately taking action. So John took his place back in the janitor's closet and continued cleaning. He would look for any signs of change, any little thing that might hint at how deep the problems went. As the hours passed, John began to notice more troubling signs. In one of the offices, he saw a worker, Lily, wiping away tears as she sat at her desk. She quickly wiped her face when she saw John coming by, but the damage was done. Her eyes told a different story than the one she tried to hide. John had seen people in pain before, but he had never truly understood what it meant for an employee to suffer in silence. The pressure of a job where they didn't feel valued was crushing them. Later in the day, while cleaning the break room, John overheard two employees talking about the CEO, the very man whose shoes he had stepped into the day before. "I heard that John Miller is a good guy," one of them said, "but he's so distant. I don't think he even knows what's going on around here. He's always on his high horse." John froze in his tracks. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Distant, high horse. These were words that many employees had used to describe him, and he had never thought much of it until now. To hear those words spoken so openly stung. It made him realize that his employees didn't see him as a leader who cared. They saw him as a man out of touch with their struggles, someone who only cared about profits, not people. John felt a deep pang of regret. He had been so focused on growing the company and increasing revenue that he had completely neglected the well-being of his staff. How many times had he walked past people like Lily, not knowing that they were struggling? How many other employees were silently battling their own issues while trying to keep up with their demanding jobs? With every passing moment, the weight of his new understanding grew heavier. The world he thought he knew was beginning to crack. The false sense of control and security he had built as CEO now seemed fragile and easily shattered. As John continued to clean, He couldn't help but think about the next step. How could he fix what he had uncovered? What would it take to make things right? It wasn't just about offering raises or changing schedules. This was about the culture of the company, the way employees were treated every single day. He needed to find a way to restore the trust that had been lost. As the day drew to a close, John's thoughts were consumed with ideas for change. He realized that a simple thank you or an acknowledgement of effort could go a long way in boosting morale. It wasn't about grand gestures, but small, consistent acts of kindness and respect that could make a difference in the lives of his employees. He had seen it firsthand. The power of being seen and heard. The company had to be a place where every employee felt valued, from the janitors to the top executives. John's mind raced as he prepared to leave for the night. He had learned a lot in his short time as a janitor, but he knew that the hard work was just beginning. He couldn't undo the damage with a single gesture, but he could start by listening, understanding, and treating his employees like the heart and soul of the company, not just the workforce behind the scenes. As he walked out of the building that evening, he felt both motivated and uncertain. There was so much more to learn, so much more to do. But one thing was clear. He had seen a side of his company that he couldn't ignore, and he was determined to make it right. Unveiling the hidden struggles. The next day, John woke up early, his mind buzzing with all that he had learned over the past few days. His undercover experience as a janitor had opened his eyes to a side of his company he had never seen before. The employees' lives were not as glamorous as he had imagined. They struggled with workloads, feelings of being undervalued, and personal hardships that were never seen by the higher-ups. As the CEO, he had always been proud of the company's growth, but now, looking at the employees who were the backbone of that success, he realized how little he had done to truly appreciate them. John couldn't shake the feeling that he had let them down by focusing too much on profits and not enough on the people who made the company thrive. In the past, he had always seen the janitors, the receptionist, and the administrative assistants as just a part of the system, necessary but somewhat invisible. Now, after spending time in their shoes, he understood the full weight of their daily lives. He had heard the sighs of exhaustion, the whispered complaints, and the quiet frustration that filled the hallways of the company. He had witnessed firsthand the isolation of workers like Lily, whose tears spoke volumes about the invisible burdens they carried. As John walked into the office building, he couldn't help but notice the change in himself. There was no longer the same arrogance or confidence in his step. His eyes weren't just focused on the numbers on his phone or the emails that needed responding to. He was looking at the employees, his employees, with new eyes. It was his second day of working undercover, and John was determined to uncover more. As he entered the janitor's closet, the first thing he noticed was the sound of a door slamming shut. It was Sarah, the receptionist, and her face was flushed with anger. She was pacing back and forth, muttering to herself. John's curiosity got the best of him, and he quietly stepped closer to listen. "Why do I even bother?" Sarah said under her breath. "They never appreciate me. I work all day, I handle the clients, answer the calls. But when it comes to the important stuff, they don't even see me." John felt a pang in his chest. He had seen Sarah greet visitors with a smile every day, but he had never truly seen the effort behind that smile. The exhaustion in her voice when she answered endless calls, the stress she endured without ever complaining. He decided to approach her, not as the CEO, but as the janitor. He pretended not to know her, but he could feel her energy shift the moment she saw him. "Are you all right, Sarah?" John asked, his voice gentle. She hesitated at first, looking around as if unsure whether to speak. But after a moment, she let her guard down and shook her head. "I'm just tired," she admitted. "Tired of doing everything, and no one noticing. I handle the day-to-day, make sure the office runs, but no one ever thanks me. No one sees me." John wanted to say something comforting, but he was struck by her words. It wasn't just about recognition. It was about being treated with respect. being valued for the work they did, no matter how small or insignificant it seemed to others. "I see you," John said quietly, as if to reassure her. "I hear you." Those simple words seemed to have a profound effect on Sarah. Her face softened, and she gave him a small, tired smile. "Thanks," she murmured before turning back to her desk. As John continued his work throughout the building, he couldn't shake the image of Sarah's face. She wasn't the only one. He had heard the same complaints from other employees, each with their own story, their own sense of being overlooked. It was clear to him now that there was a culture of silence at the company. Everyone worked hard, but no one felt seen. And that, John realized, was what needed to change. Later that afternoon, while John was cleaning the conference room, he overheard a conversation between two managers. They were discussing an upcoming meeting with clients and were joking about how the cleaning staff had been working harder than the actual employees in the office. "Seriously, they do all the work," one manager laughed. "And what do we do? Sit in meetings and make decisions. They're the real heroes of this place." John froze. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here were the people who had all the power, all the control, laughing at the very employees who kept the place running smoothly. His heart sank as he realized how much work there was to do to change this toxic mindset. As the day came to a close, John left the office feeling more determined than ever. He couldn't ignore the reality he had uncovered. He had seen firsthand how his employees felt invisible and unappreciated. He couldn't just go back to his old ways of thinking. He needed to change the way he led this company, to start valuing the people who made it all possible. It wasn't enough to simply offer a raise or give a pat on the back. No, the entire culture had to shift. John knew that tomorrow he would face even more revelations about his employees' lives. But he was ready. He was no longer just a CEO behind a desk. He was a man who had witnessed the struggles of his workers and understood the depth of the disconnect between him and his staff. Now, it was time for him to take action. The truth revealed. John woke up the next morning, his mind swirling with thoughts of what he had learned so far. He had witnessed so much in just a few days. Stories of exhaustion, frustration, and neglect among his employees. And now, more than ever, he knew something had to change. Today was going to be different. His undercover journey as a janitor had revealed things he never could have imagined, and he was determined to continue uncovering the truth. John had always believed that his leadership was making a difference, but now he realized that he had been blind to the struggles his employees faced every day. As he walked into the building, John immediately noticed the heavy atmosphere. There was an unspoken tension in the air, like everyone was waiting for something, but no one dared to speak about it. His employees were busy with their work, but he could see the tiredness in their eyes. They weren't just physically exhausted, they were emotionally drained. His first stop was the break room. There he found Lisa, the head of accounting. She was sitting alone, her head in her hands, clearly overwhelmed. John had seen her in meetings, where she appeared confident and in control, but now he could see the cracks in the facade. "Lisa, are you okay?" he asked, sitting down across from her. She looked up, startled at first, then sighed heavily. "I'm just tired, John. Tired of being the one to carry the load. I'm always crunching the numbers, making sure everything runs smoothly, but it's never enough. No one notices how much work goes into this job. It's like I'm invisible." John listened, his heart sinking. He had never realized how much pressure Lisa and others like her were under. They worked long hours, often going above and beyond their job descriptions, but all they received in return was silence. No recognition, no appreciation. "I see you," John said quietly, repeating the words he had spoken to Sarah the day before. Lisa blinked, taken aback by his words. "What?" "I see you," John said again, with more sincerity this time. "I see all of you, your hard work, your dedication. It doesn't go unnoticed." Lisa didn't say anything right away. She just stared at him. And for a moment, John wondered if he had said the right thing. But then she looked away, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." As John continued his day, he couldn't stop thinking about what Lisa had said. He had no idea that people in his company felt so unappreciated, so overlooked. He had assumed that everything was running smoothly, that everyone was happy with their work, but he had been wrong. Later that day, he overheard a conversation between two employees in the hall. One of them was Tom, a senior engineer, and the other was Hannah, a receptionist. They were talking about a recent project that had gone over budget, and John could hear the frustration in their voices. "It's always the same," Tom said. "We put in all this effort, we give it everything we've got, but no one acknowledges our work. They just look at the numbers and move on. No one cares about the sacrifices we make to get the job done." "Tell me about it," Hannah replied. "I've been handling client calls all day, and it's like I'm invisible. I'm the first point of contact, but when something goes wrong, I'm the one who gets blamed. No one even asks me how I'm doing." John's heart sank as he listened to their conversation. He had no idea that his employees felt so disrespected. His mind began racing, and he realized that it wasn't just about the work. It was about the culture he had unknowingly fostered. The pressure to perform, the lack of recognition, the feeling of being invisible. It had all built up over time, and now it was spilling over. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He had to do something. Determined to get to the heart of the issue, John decided to take a bold step. He would confront the problem head-on. No more hiding behind the title of CEO. No more pretending that everything was fine. It was time for change. He needed to understand the real issues, not just from the perspective of the executives, but from the people who did the hard work every day. That afternoon, John called a meeting with his senior management team. As the team gathered in the conference room, he could feel the weight of what he was about to do. This wasn't going to be a regular meeting. This wasn't about numbers or reports. It was about the culture of the company. It was about the people. As the managers filed into the room, John stood at the front, his face serious. "I've seen the truth," he began. "I've seen how hard everyone is working, and how little they're being appreciated for it. We've created a culture where our employees feel invisible, overworked, and underappreciated. And it ends today." The room fell silent. The managers exchanged uneasy glances, clearly surprised by John's words. But John didn't care about their reactions. He was done pretending. "We need to change," John continued. "We need to start recognizing our employees, valuing their hard work, and showing them that they matter. This isn't just about the bottom line. It's about the people who make the company what it is." The meeting went on for hours as John and his team discussed the changes that needed to be made. There would be new policies, new programs to support employees, and a renewed focus on creating a positive, inclusive work environment. It wouldn't be easy, but John knew it was the right thing to do. As the meeting came to a close, John felt a sense of resolve. The truth had been revealed, and now it was time for action. But he knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long, and there would be challenges along the way. But he was ready to make the changes that his company desperately needed. The first steps toward change. The following week was a whirlwind for John. After the meeting with his senior management team, he wasted no time putting his plan into action. He knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. If he was going to truly transform the company, he had to take concrete steps and show his employees that he was serious about the changes. John began with the introduction of new initiatives aimed at improving employee morale and acknowledging their hard work. He also started implementing a series of meetings with staff members from all departments, not just the executives, to hear their voices directly. It was clear that the traditional top-down approach had failed, and now it was time for a more open, inclusive strategy. His first move was to create an employee recognition program. This program would highlight the efforts of employees at all levels. Every week, Employees would be nominated by their peers for exceptional work. The winners would be publicly celebrated, not just with awards, but with real incentives. Extra time off, gift cards, even opportunities for professional development. John also started monthly town hall meetings where employees could speak openly about their concerns without fear of retribution. As he rolled out these changes, John made it a point to personally visit departments, talk to employees, and express his gratitude for their hard work. His message was simple but powerful. You matter. It wasn't just a slogan. It was the foundation of the company's new culture. John's first stop was the maintenance team. He remembered how they had been the ones who worked quietly in the background, often forgotten and underappreciated. He walked into their break room, where a few employees were gathered around a table, sipping coffee. "Hey, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you. I see the work you do, and I want you to know it doesn't go unnoticed," John said, his voice sincere. The team looked up, surprised. They had never heard their CEO speak to them like this before. For a moment, they were all silent, unsure how to respond. Then, one of the janitors, a middle-aged man named Mike, cleared his throat and spoke. "Thank you, sir. It means a lot to hear that. We don't get much recognition for what we do. It's just expected, you know." John nodded. "I understand. That's going to change. I want to make sure every one of you knows how important you are to this company. We're in this together." The group exchanged glances, some smiling in disbelief. They had never heard a CEO speak to them so personally, so openly. For the first time in a long while, they felt seen. Word of John's new approach quickly spread throughout the office. Employees from all corners of the company began to feel a sense of hope that had been missing for years. The new recognition program, the open door policy, and the sincere effort to connect with people on a personal level were beginning to make a noticeable difference. However, not everyone was on board with the changes. There were still a few employees in higher positions who felt threatened by John's new approach. They had been used to the old way of doing things, where power and control were centralized, and the lower-level employees were just numbers to manage. One afternoon, John received an email from one of his senior managers, Karen. The subject line read, "Concern about Employee Recognition Program." John opened the email, which contained a lengthy list of complaints. Karen expressed her concerns that the new recognition program was too inclusive and could create division among employees. She worried that giving too much attention to lower-level workers might alienate the upper management, who were often responsible for making the big decisions. John's heart sank as he read her words. It seemed like some people still didn't understand what he was trying to achieve. To them, employees were just tools to get the job done, not people who deserved respect and recognition. But John wasn't ready to back down. He knew that this was the right path, no matter how difficult it might be. The next day, John called Karen into his office. As she sat across from him, John could sense her unease. She was a seasoned manager with years of experience, but today she was clearly on the defensive. "I've read your concerns," John said, his tone calm but firm. "I understand that change can be difficult, but this is something we need to do. We can't continue to treat employees like machines, Karen. They're people, and they deserve to feel valued." Karen didn't speak right away, but the tension in the room was palpable. She shifted in her seat, then finally spoke. "I just don't know if this will work. We've always been successful with the old way of doing things." John leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "And look where that's gotten us. Our employees are tired, overworked, and underappreciated. If we keep going the way we have, we'll lose the heart of this company. But if we invest in them, if we show them that they matter, we'll build a stronger, more loyal team. That's what I believe in." There was a long silence. Karen's eyes softened, and she finally nodded. "I see your point. I'll support the changes, but I'll need to make sure that the upper management is also on board." John smiled, feeling a sense of relief. I'm not asking anyone to do anything they don't believe in. But if we work together, I know we can make this company a place where everyone can thrive. Over the next few weeks, the changes John implemented started to take root. The employees were beginning to feel the difference, and so were the managers. The sense of camaraderie in the office grew stronger, and even the skeptics couldn't deny that the atmosphere had improved. But John knew that this was just the beginning. He had taken the first steps toward creating a culture of respect, but there was still much work to be done. The road ahead would be long, and there would be challenges along the way. But John was more determined than ever to see it through. He had a vision, and he knew that with time, this company could become a place where every employee was valued, not just for their productivity, but for who they were as people. As John sat back in his office, looking out over the city skyline, he couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. The transformation had begun, and he was ready to lead it. He was no longer just a CEO. He was someone who truly cared about the people who made his company great. The resistance grows. Despite the early successes of John's new approach, the road ahead was anything but smooth. The ripple effect of his decisions started to stir tension in the higher ranks of the company. It became increasingly clear that not everyone was on board with his vision, and some were actively trying to undermine it. John had expected resistance. Change always brings it, but he hadn't anticipated the level of pushback he was facing. Some managers, especially those who had been with the company for years, felt that John was threatening the very foundation of the way they had built their careers. They had grown accustomed to a system where power dynamics were clear and employees were expected to fall in line without question. One afternoon, as John sat in his office reviewing performance metrics, his assistant, Linda, knocked on the door. She entered with a look of concern on her face, holding a stack of documents. "John, you need to see this," Linda said, handing him the papers. It was a report about the company's finances, but it wasn't the numbers that caught John's attention. It was the margin notes on the side. As he read through the documents, he realized that several managers had been deliberately ignoring the new employee recognition program. Some were even discouraging their teams from participating, believing that it would create division between departments and give too much credit to workers who didn't deserve it. John's frustration mounted. He had worked hard to introduce these changes, and yet it seemed some people were working against him, but he wasn't about to let them derail his efforts. He knew he needed to address the issue directly. That evening, John scheduled a meeting with his senior management team. When they all gathered in the conference room the next morning, there was a palpable tension in the air. Everyone knew that this meeting was going to be different. John stood at the head of the table, his expression serious but determined. "I've seen the reports, and I'm aware that some of you have concerns about the changes we're making," John began, his voice steady. "But let me be clear, this isn't just a suggestion. This is the future of our company. I will not allow a few people to undermine the hard work of the rest of the employees who are embracing these changes." A few of the managers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Karen, the senior manager who had been a vocal critic of the new initiatives, spoke up. "John, we understand the intent behind these changes, but we've been running things this way for years, and it's been successful," she said, trying to maintain control of the conversation. "What you're asking us to do is not just change the way we work, it's changing the very culture of this company." John leaned forward, meeting Karen's gaze. "I understand your concerns, Karen, but success based on outdated practices isn't sustainable. Our employees are the backbone of this company, and if we don't start treating them with respect, we'll lose them. I'm not asking for change just for the sake of change. I'm asking for a better future, one where everyone has the chance to thrive." There was a long pause as the room absorbed John's words. Karen's expression softened, but she still looked skeptical. "John, I agree that something needs to change," she said after a moment. "But I think we need a more gradual approach. Not everyone is ready for this kind of shift." John nodded. He understood that not everyone would be on board immediately. Change was hard, and it required time. But he couldn't afford to wait forever. The company's culture had been toxic for too long, and the longer he waited, the harder it would be to change. "Okay," John said, his voice calm but firm. "We'll take a more gradual approach, but I want to see immediate results. We'll start with department-wide meetings to discuss the new programs, and I want feedback from everyone, employees and managers alike. But make no mistake, the direction we're headed is non-negotiable." The meeting ended with a tense silence. As John left the room, he felt the weight of the challenge ahead. He knew that this battle was far from over, but he was prepared for the fight. He had to make sure his vision succeeded, not just for him, but for the employees who were counting on him to make their voices heard. Over the next few weeks, John began implementing his plan with more force. He scheduled department-wide meetings, where employees could voice their concerns directly, and ensured that the senior management team attended. He also increased the frequency of his own interactions with staff members, making sure they felt heard and appreciated. However, the resistance didn't stop there. Some managers began actively undermining John's efforts, spreading rumors that the changes were a temporary phase and would eventually fade. John had hoped that Karen would become an ally, but she still didn't fully believe in the vision. It became clear that the battle between John and the old guard was heating up. John's every move was being scrutinized, and he knew that he had to push even harder to ensure that his vision took root. One evening, after a particularly heated meeting, John sat alone in his office, staring out at the city lights. The pressure was mounting, and he felt the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. Was he doing the right thing? Was he risking everything for a future that might not come to pass? But then he thought about the employees, those who had started to believe in the changes, who were beginning to feel seen and valued. He couldn't back down now. The company's future depended on it. With renewed determination, John picked up the phone and dialed Karen's number. "Karen, I need you to understand something," he said when she answered. "I'm not giving up on this. I'm not giving up on our employees, and I need you to make a decision. Are you with me or are you not?" A new beginning. As days passed, John's patience wore thin. The tension within the company was palpable, and he could feel the weight of the resistance mounting against him. He had been in leadership positions before, but never had he faced such a deep-rooted challenge. His belief in change was unwavering, but he now realized that not everyone was ready to embrace the future he envisioned. The question was, how much longer could he keep pushing? The resistance from the senior management team had escalated to new heights. Employees were now caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to their longtime managers and the hope of a better work environment. John's vision for the company, one where employees were empowered, appreciated, and given a real opportunity for growth, was in jeopardy. It all came to a head one Friday afternoon. John had just finished a call with an outside consultant who had been advising him on the company's financial situation. Despite his efforts, it seemed the numbers weren't aligning with the rapid changes he'd implemented. Some of the more traditional members of the team had grown increasingly vocal in their disapproval, and whispers of dissatisfaction had begun to spread like wildfire. John knew something drastic had to be done. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. If he didn't act soon, all of his hard work might unravel. His vision for a modern, thriving company was on the line. That evening, he called a company-wide meeting. This wasn't going to be just another presentation. He was going to lay it all on the line. John knew that if he didn't inspire his team now, the future he wanted for the company would slip away forever. The following Monday, the entire company gathered in the main conference room. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and even John's trusted employees, who had been supporting him through this journey, seemed uneasy. He could feel the uncertainty in the room. Every employee, from the janitor to the highest-ranking managers, was waiting to hear what John would say next. When he stood at the front of the room, John could see the divided faces. Some employees looked eager, ready to fight alongside him for a better future, while others appeared skeptical, unsure of where this path would lead. John took a deep breath, his heart racing. This was his moment. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know things have been difficult, and I know there are concerns about the changes we've made. But let me tell you something. The way we've been doing things is no longer enough. The world is changing, and if we want to stay relevant, if we want to grow, we have to change too. This isn't just about new programs or policies. It's about creating a future where everyone has the opportunity to succeed." He paused, allowing his words to settle. He could see some employees nodding in agreement, while others still looked uncertain. "I'm not asking you to accept these changes without question. I'm asking you to believe in the vision for this company. I'm asking you to believe in each other," John continued, his voice gaining strength. "We all have a part to play, and this company is only as strong as its people. If we don't support each other, if we don't trust each other, then we will never succeed." The room fell silent. John could feel the weight of the moment. This was his last chance to turn things around. If the company was going to survive this cultural shift, he needed to unite everyone in the room. "I know some of you have doubts," he said, addressing the skeptics directly. "But think about the future we can build together. Think about what we can accomplish if we all work toward the same goal. It's not just about making money. It's about making a difference. It's about creating a workplace where everyone feels valued, where everyone has a chance to grow." The silence was broken by a single voice. One of the employees in the back of the room, who had been silent up until this point, stood up and spoke. "I believe in this," she said, her voice strong. "I believe in the changes you're making, John. We've all felt the shift happening, and it's time we take a stand. I'm with you." Her words seemed to break the tension in the room. Slowly, others began to speak up, one by one, voicing their support for John's vision. It was a moment of realization. Everyone in the room had been waiting for someone to lead the charge, to show them that change was possible. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere had shifted. The resistance had not disappeared completely, but it had been weakened. John knew that this was just the beginning of a long journey. There were still many hurdles to overcome, but the foundation for change had been laid. He had gained the trust of his employees, and that was the most important step. Over the next few months, John continued to push forward with his vision. The resistance didn't disappear overnight, but it gradually faded as more employees saw the benefits of the changes. New programs were implemented successfully, and John made sure to personally acknowledge the efforts of those who had embraced the new direction. The company culture began to shift in profound ways. Employees felt more empowered, and productivity soared as people began to believe in the future John had promised. Slowly but surely, the company was becoming the thriving, innovative place he had envisioned. In the end, John had not only saved the company from stagnation, but had transformed it into a dynamic, forward-thinking organization. His decision to go undercover had revealed the truth about the company's culture, and his bold actions had changed the course of its future. The journey had been difficult, but it had been worth every challenge. As John looked out at the bustling office, filled with motivated, engaged employees, he knew that he had made the right decision. The company was stronger than ever, and he had a renewed sense of purpose. John had proven that, with the right leadership and a willingness to embrace change, anything was possible. And as he smiled, he knew the company's best days were still ahead.